Today we're going to talk about a pretty exciting update about the For the People Act and Biden's vaccine mandate for businesses and the GOP's response to it. I interview someone on the right, which doesn't happen often, the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, where I pressed him on his own state's voter suppression bill and whether he would vote for Trump if he ran again in 2024. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. First up, obviously a topic close to my heart, the For the People Act, and we actually have some movement here. And it's actually something that's really promising. It turns out that a group of Senate Democrats is nearing an agreement on a compromise version of S1, and that the effort was led by Joe Manchin, along with Chuck Schumer. The other senators involved were Amy Klobuchar, Jeff Merkley, Raphael Warnock, Alex Padilla, Angus King, Tim Kaine, and John Tester. Now, you'll remember that in June, Joe Manchin issued a list of provisions that he would support within the For the People Act, and it does include a good number of the provisions that are in the original legislation, and that includes early voting, automatic voter registration, bans on dark money, and most importantly, limits to partisan gerrymandering. And it even includes some voter ID, which, by the way, is fine. I've spoken about this before. The issue with voter ID isn't that Democrats aren't willing to show any ID, it's the disparity in terms of what's acceptable ID or not. When you have gun licenses but not student IDs as acceptable forms of ID, that's not okay. When only driver's licenses are accepted, which might preclude those who can't drive, that's not okay. When it's only forms of ID that cost money to buy, precluding low-income folks from voting, that's not okay. But as long as there are options, and those options are fair and equitable and don't limit access, and certainly don't act as a modern-day poll tax, then we can make it work. So the important point here is that the For the People Act is now Manchin's bill to sell. It's got his name on it, he crafted it, and it was his time spent drafting it. And honestly, that is the single best position we could be in right now, considering the alternative, which is, a bill crafted by Bernie Sanders that we just wait for Manchin to disavow via some op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And so if ever he had a vested interest in making sure that this passes, it's now when it's literally his bill. So look, he said from the beginning that Republicans are going to be reasonable, that Republicans are going to meet him halfway. I think that's utterly insane, but look, now that hypothesis will be put to the test in the most clear and direct way. If he does the impossible and gets Republicans aboard, great, this thing becomes law. And if he can't, then maybe that'll be the kick in the ass that Manchin needs to prove to him that these Republicans aren't interested in legislating, they're not interested in democracy, they are only interested in consolidating power for themselves, and that the only resolution here is to eliminate or reform the filibuster so that we can protect our system of government. I hope that what we're seeing right now is the beginning stages of Manchin realizing that something's got to give and that he needs to exercise his power to shore up our democracy. Because the truth is that he holds the cards here, but having him lead this fight is the best case scenario among what are otherwise really limited options. Okay, let's switch gears to the vaccine mandate. With COVID cases having risen about 300% from this time last year, even despite vaccines being readily available, Joe Biden's issued a sweeping new mandate requiring all employers with more than 100 employees to either be vaccinated or get tested weekly, which would cover about 80 million Americans. Vaccines will also be mandatory at healthcare facilities that receive Medicare and Medicaid, to which totals another 17 million workers. And finally, the mandate extends to employees of the executive branch and all contractors who do business with the federal government. So in total, roughly 100 million people are going to be affected by this mandate. And before I get into anything else, here's the most important point here. These mandates work. Consider the fact that most mandates are compulsory for public schools. In the 1970s, there were tens of thousands of cases of measles. By 2005, there were 66. And that's not to mention vaccines for polio, DTaP, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, chickenpox, all of which aren't an issue in this country because, again, vaccine mandates work. I mean, just look at today. San Francisco schools have reported 0 COVID outbreaks after 90% of the eligible students got vaccinated. Compare that with Florida, where schools weren't able to stay open for more than a few days because thousands upon thousands of students and staff and teachers were getting infected. And yet, that hasn't stopped the right from having a collective fainting spell over this move by Biden, calling it a gross abuse of power. And just on a human level here, imagine getting angrier over the solution to a pandemic than the pandemic itself. Like, we've lost 660,000 Americans. It's the third biggest mass casualty event in American history. Imagine having seen more Americans die than in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and Korea combined, and thinking that the issue here is the vaccine. A vaccine, by the way, that is proven to be safe and to save lives. The CDC came out with findings from a major study showing that the unvaccinated are 11 times more likely to die of COVID and 10 times more likely to be hospitalized. How much more proof are we waiting for? What else do we need? We're coming up on a year that it's been available. There are about 200 million Americans who've gotten the shot. They're surviving at an exponentially higher rate than the unvaccinated. The vaccine is FDA approved. We have the information we need. So at this point, there is no legitimate or scientific or medical reason not to get the vaccine. There is just a political reason. And we've lost our collective patience allowing this pandemic to spread because Republicans want to turn everything into a culture war. And that's a sentiment that was echoed by Biden himself.
My message to unvaccinated Americans is this. What more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing. But just don't take it from me. Listen to the voices of unvaccinated Americans who are lying in hospital beds, taking their final breath saying, if only I'd gotten vaccinated. If only. It's a tragedy. Please don't let it become yours.
By the way, people agree with him. There was polling in all of the battleground states asking if they favored or opposed major corporations requiring employees and contractors to provide proof of vaccination. And it was 68-32 in favor in Arizona, 63-37 in favor in Georgia, 61-39 in favor of Michigan, 64-36 in favor in Pennsylvania, and 68-32 in favor in Wisconsin. People are tired. They're tired of this pandemic. They're tired of their neighbors dying. But more tellingly, they're tired of being mired in this perpetual cycle that's only being prolonged by people on one side of the political spectrum. The way to end this is not to march in the streets and yell freedom. It is to get people vaccinated. If you oppose the vaccine, then you are helping the virus spread. The fact is that we need to be done letting a dangerous minority of Americans dictate the terms of this conversation just because they're loud. Watching people die now, still, in September of 2021 is not worth appeasing a shrinking faction of Americans who think that a life-saving vaccine is going to make you magnetized. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. We have a decision to make. Are we trying to ensure that people survive, or are we trying to placate people who can't be placated? If it's the former, then ignore the noise and get this done because we've wasted too much time and lost too many lives to listen to professional provocateurs or the outright ignorant even a second longer. We know how to end this, so good on Biden for taking aggressive steps to get it done. One last note here, California. September 14th is the last day to vote in the recall election. Do not assume that this one's in the bag because Republicans are banking on high enthusiasm on the right and complacency on the left. All you got to do is vote no on that ballot and then drop it in a drop box. I just dropped mine in one all of 4 minutes away from my house. So please do your part and return your ballot. To listen to my interview with the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, about his own state's voter suppression bill and whether he would vote for Trump in 2024, click on the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.